Ooh, loud. Once again, welcome everyone to Los Angeles Birders webinar tonight. Tonight's going to be a wonderful webinar, but before we get there, I just want to remind you that Lab is an all-volunteer nonprofit organization. We rely upon volunteers to do what we do. Uh, we offer we offer live and recorded webinars. Our student learning opportunities are par excellence. We have field trips, because what can I speak? Wonderful community science opportunities out there. In fact, we had one just last Sunday when we set up a picket line to watch for Swainson's Hawks coming over to San Gabriel's. So please get involved. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Charlie, who will introduce our speaker for tonight. Charlie?
Thanks, Ron. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Lance Benner. Lance is a planetary scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where he specializes in radar imaging of near-Earth asteroids. Many of you also know Lance for his significant contributions to eBird, particularly in the field of sound recording. Since 2009, Lance has built on an extensive collection of bird sound recordings, contributing to major audio databases such as Xeno-Canto and the Macaulay Library. His recordings have been featured in research papers, books, educational programs, smartphone apps, and the development of sound recognition software. Tonight, Lance will share his expertise in bird sound recording and introduce the latest advancements in sound recording software and equipment. He'll provide valuable insights into the newest tools available for field recording and analysis. Please join me in welcoming Lance.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for the very kind words and warm introduction. Okay, so let's get things going. Assuming I can get this to share the way I want it to. Oops. There we go. Okay. We're going to be switching back and forth quite a bit tonight between PowerPoint and some other software, principally Audacity, to play recordings and look at sonograms. Before I dig into this, though, first of all, could somebody please confirm that you are, in fact, hearing me?
Yeah, you're all set. We can see and hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is an updated version of a talk that I first gave for Los Angeles Birders in the fall of 2020. A number of things have changed in the last 4.5 years, and a lot of equipment has changed, software has changed. The Merlin app has become very widespread. Millions of people are using it. And so I wanted to give an update and also to give a more concise version of the presentation. Last time we spread it out over 2 presentations, 1 week apart. And so this time I've collapsed it. Oops, I've collapsed it into one. Sorry, the screen here is very touchy. So I'm going to be playing a lot of recordings and showing you sonograms. This is an example of a sonogram in front of you right now. And we're going to be listening to a number of recordings. This particular one is a green-tailed towhee. Oops, sorry. Having trouble with this. This is very touchy. So this is a green-tailed towhee from Buckhorn from last spring. So let's have a quick listen to it. The sonogram here is a screen grab of the beginning, or actually a part of the recording, about a minute into it. I'm going to play part of it, and it's some of the sonograms we'll show later are going to scroll. This one will not. This is a static one. So having said that, let's play it. So I just wanted to do this to give a sense of the types of recordings that you can get in our area very easily. This particular recording was obtained using a dedicated recorder and a microphone. But if you went up to the Buckhorn day use area tomorrow, you could hear some beautiful things singing. Not green-tailed towhees, they aren't here yet, but fox sparrows are. Oops, I was up there just a couple of days ago, and the fox sparrows were definitely singing quite loudly. So why do all this? Why record bird sounds? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and we'll go through those. So basically, here's a quick overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to say a little bit more about what an audio spectrogram or a sonogram is. We're going to talk quite a bit about how to record bird sounds with cell phones. I'm going to provide a brief introduction to the Audacity and Raven Light sound software apps, both of which are free. Then we're going to talk about other recording equipment, dedicated recorders and external microphones. And I'll say some things about autonomous recorders, or autonomous recording units, ARUs as they're known. And then we'll say some things about just some simple things one can do to improve recordings, to get recordings and to make them even better. So why do all this? Well, there are many reasons, and each one of them is personal for each person who wants to record things. But for me, here are some of the reasons why I like to record bird songs. I mean, some of them are simply that the songs are just extremely beautiful. I grew up in the Northeast. I spent a lot of time in the spring and summer in Vermont, where there were a lot of wood thrushes, hermit thrushes, and veeries, and also American robins and white-throated sparrows and common loons and so forth. So I was very fortunate to hear a lot of beautiful bird song from a very, very early age, and I heard them year after year. And I just find them captivating. Recording bird sounds is an excellent way to learn them, to learn what the species are. And that can really expand your identification skills. Recording birds is a great way to document things that are rare. It's often quite a bit easier to record sounds than it is to get a photo of something that's, say, skulking in a bush. You can also, with some simple equipment, including as simple as your cell phone, make valuable scientific contributions. I started doing this about 14 years ago with red crossbills and evening grosbeaks that I started recording. And you don't need fancy equipment to get useful recordings. We helped figure out which ones were in our area. I'll say more about that later. So there are really a number of community science opportunities with this. I personally like to upload recordings to online databases. I've uploaded quite a few, almost 3,000 now, to the Macaulay Library at Cornell through eBird. And I don't remember how many I've uploaded to Xeno-Canto. It's a lot. Each one of them is analogous to a museum specimen. One can also do recordings to try to monitor nocturnal migration through nocturnal flight calls. I know there are a number of people in the Los Angeles area who do this, but we really need to recruit more people. It's a very important area that needs a lot more attention. Soundscapes, that is just recordings of whatever happens to be vocalizing, particularly at dawn. Those are increasingly important to document the species that we have, in various places around the world. That's something else that I've been doing. The overall kind of conclusion for me personally is that recording bird sounds has made the whole experience of birding dramatically more rewarding. It's really kind of changed the whole experience for me in a significant way. So some examples of contributions. A number of my recordings have appeared in scientific journals, papers on red crossbills, white-breasted nuthatches, Cassins and Plumbeus vireos, geographic variations in white-throated sparrow songs, spotted owls. I provided recordings to some graduate students who were investigating spotted owl vocalizations. A number of my recordings have appeared in the Peterson Field Guides to Bird Sounds, Eastern and Western North America, books that were authored by Nathan Peploe. The Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology issued a collection of vocalizations of basically all the species in North America in 2020. A number of my recordings appeared in it, and they were available because I had uploaded them through eBird to the Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And so forth. Some of my recordings are being used by the Merlin app and also BirdNet to help improve machine learning to identify bird sounds. And some of my spotted owl recordings are being used by surveyors for the U.S. Forest Service in California and Oregon to monitor spotted owls. So here's an example of a sonogram. This is a recording or a screen grab of, I guess, about 7 seconds or so of a white-eyed vireo that I recorded about 10 days ago near Conroe, Texas. This was at the W.G. Jones State Forest, a well-known place for finding red-cockaded woodpeckers. But there were also a couple of white-eyed vireos there. And so I recorded them. So each one of the sonograms, or audio spectrograms as they're more formally known, it has time along the horizontal axis. So time increases from the left to the right, and then frequency, or also you could think of it as pitch, increases from the bottom to the top. This particular bird has sounds that sweep up and down over quite a wide range of frequencies, from about 2 kilohertz or 2000 hertz up to close to 6.5 kilohertz. And there are various complicated things happening here. So the dark marks you see, the dark kind of traces you see on the sonogram against the lighter gray background, those are a graphical representation of the sound of the bird. And so in this particular case, it caught the vireo singing 2 different short song sort of fragments, if you will. In terms of the range of human hearing, people who have really good ears can hear down to in the realm of 200 to 300 hertz. Below that, you might feel some vibrations, but you don't really hear it at lower frequencies. And the people with very acute hearing, especially folks who are, younger than I am, might be able to hear up over 10,000 or over 10 kilohertz. Generally, as you get older, your ability to hear the high frequencies diminishes. So sonograms are somewhat analogous really to sheet music. So on the left here are the first few notes from the Star Spangled Banner. And on the right are what they would look like if you just whistled them and turned that into an audio spectrogram or a sonogram. This is a nice illustration from one of Nathan Peplow's books. And you can see that there are some short notes, and then they get a little bit longer, and then quite a bit longer with the last one, which is, of course, what you would also, realize if you look at the music over on the left. So here's another illustration. This is one from the Warbler Guide by Tom Stevenson and Scott Whittle. And so again, time increases from the left to the right. Pitch increases from bottom. Sorry, that's an unfamiliar laptop, and it's a lot more touchy than I'm used to. Pitch or frequency increases from bottom to the top. The dark lines, if it's a thick dark line, then it's louder. If it's a thin one, then it's not as loud. And so having said that, let's switch gears and listen to some recordings. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and we're going to switch and play some recordings. So we're going to start with a wood thrush. And if I can get it, there we go. So you'll see some other complicated stuff in the background here. I've got a bunch of different sonograms open. So this is a wood thrush that I recorded at my sister's house in Maine in July of 2019. So we're going to play a number of seconds of this. This is a good example of the type of recording you can get with a dedicated sound recorder, but not especially fancy, and an external microphone. Okay, so that was one example. And let's see, I want to switch to another one. So we're going to close the wood thrush. You don't need to save it. And we're going to open a different one now. If I can find the one I want. Yeah, we want to do the white-eyed vireo. So Here's the white-eyed vireo that I showed you a moment ago. Excuse me. So this particular recording was obtained in somewhat windy conditions, and that explains this broad dark region you see along the bottom of the display in the sonogram. Windy conditions, and also there is a highway. So this is again in that forest in Conroe, Texas, and there's a highway just a little bit north of here, a few hundred yards to the north, and that is why there is that big dark line, that big dark swath there, was because of that. Okay, so let's turn that one off. Let's play another one. So I've got a number of these kind of ready to go. Here's another one from Maine. Let's see. There it is. So these are common loons, some spring peeper frogs, and Canada geese. This is from a lake, again in Maine, near my sister's house. So it sounds like this that have inspired me to make recordings. I mean, I just love hearing these things. I've been, as I say, very lucky to be able to experience this sort of thing. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint and resume that. Oops, did I do it? So there's the PowerPoint, sharing that. Okay. And here we go. So we listened to some examples. We did that already. So I mentioned red crossbills. Here are some sonograms of crossbills that we recorded in 2011. It was the first time we had identified one of the flight call types in the southern part of the state. And I did that with some very simple equipment. You could do this with a cell phone. At the time, we didn't know which ones were around here of the 13 different flight call types that are now known in North America. Here's an example of one. This was one of the first recording of a Type 3. So this right here, those are Type 3 red crossbill flight calls. That was recorded at a basketball court at Pear Blossom Park in the Antelope Valley. So far, only 3 red crossbill types have turned up in Southern California, 2, 3, and 4. There could be others, especially Type 5, because they occur in the Sierra Nevada and farther north. So if you ever find crossbills, please record them, even with a cell phone. You might get something useful and make a valuable contribution. So which devices can you actually use to obtain recordings? You really can use cell phones. So I'm going to talk about that. And of course, dedicated recorders. In an earlier version of this talk, I also mentioned digital SLRs, point and shoot cameras, video cameras, and so forth. They can all shoot video, and you can extract sound files from those. However, I'm not really going to say anything else about those in the talk, because cell phones are just so common now, and everybody's using them. So yes, it really is possible to obtain, good recordings from a cell phone. Obviously, you need to have some kind of app on the phone to get recordings. Well, smartphones always come with one. The Android phones and the iPhones all have one. On an iPhone, they're all loaded with voice memo. I don't know what the corresponding program is or what the corresponding app is on an Android phone, but I know there is one. And of course, you can also install some, and many of those are free. So we're going to look at an example of this momentarily. Before we do this, though, the last statement on the slide says you can also connect an external microphone to an iPhone or an Android phone. You certainly can do that, and some people have a lot of luck with it. But I find that it's kind of cumbersome to do the controls on a phone. It's a lot easier for me to have a dedicated recorder. So I'm not going to say much more about that. So let me play an example of a recording that was obtained with a cell phone. And let's see, this one. Yeah, this is one. So see if I can find it. Okay, so this is a recording of some Canada geese. This was also obtained in Maine last fall. So this was a flock of about, I think, 15 or 20 geese. They were on a lake, and they took off, and some of them kept on calling as they left. So that was obtained with a cell phone, an iPhone 15. And, you know, it worked perfectly fine. I, in fact, use my cell phone to obtain recordings all the time. I prefer, if I have it, to use a dedicated recorder or microphone, but I regularly will do other things, you know, use my cell phone. So here's another example. This is a northern cardinal. I think given that it's already after 7:30, I'm not going to play this one because I have a lot of things I want to cover. But this is a cardinal, again, from the woodlands in Texas. You can see some very sharp notes and then the rapid other calls that they make. So peer, 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 that kind of a call. This was obtained with a cell phone. The bird was about 20 feet from me. Conditions were windy, which explains all of the dark, noisy stuff at the bottom of the display on the spectrogram. But despite the wind, I was still able to get, you know, a useful recording, and it actually worked quite well. Here's another example. This is kind of faint, but so these are recordings using an older phone, an iPhone 8 that I used to use. It was a long-eared owl that I stumbled into when I was on my mountain bike one night in San Gabriel's. Oops, so that started without me planning on it. The display at the top shows a recording obtained with the voice memo app on the phone. And the one on the bottom was using a dedicated recorder, recording app, Rodu Rec, which provided a better recording. Sorry, that was uncompressed. I'll play it. It's a little bit hard to hear. It's kind of soft, but let's give this a quick play. So again, that was recorded with a cell phone. You know, the sensitivity was good enough to pick up something useful, and when you display it in a sonogram, you can clearly tell what it is. So here is a list of some of the various apps that are available for cell phones. They're basically all free now. It used to be that you had to pay some money for some of these, but they're now all available for free. The ones at the top are the ones that I use the most. RecForge, that one's an Android app, and last I knew it was not available for, that's the one at the bottom, not available for an iPhone. Of these, 3 of them will also generate sonograms in real time as you're getting the recording. That's a really useful feature. Song Meter Touch does a particularly nice job of that. But I use Voice Record Pro the most because it's the one that seems to be the most sensitive. It's definitely more sensitive than the Merlin app, which I'll talk about at some length shortly. So these are all, you know, worth giving a try. Personally, I prefer Voice Record Pro because of its sensitivity. But having a sonogram is also valuable. The sonograms that happen automatically with Song Meter Touch are quite a bit better than the ones in Merlin. And Song Meter Touch and Voice Record Pro are both more sensitive. Once you have a recording, then you have to transfer it to some other device. At least I do. in order to, for example, upload it to eBird or to do something with it. And there are various ways you can do that. AirDrop is the way I use. You can also text it to yourself or, do other things. So here's what some of the displays look like for Audacity, for Voice Record Pro. This is as it's shown on an iPhone. This is a really useful piece of software. Sorry, it used to cost $10. Now it's free. You can configure it to a modest extent. That's the panel over on the left. You can fiddle with the gain, for example, and some other minor things. Then the next display on the right shows you a list of files. And then if you want to do something to transfer the file to another device, there are ways you can do it. And then you can also do some other fiddling over here, make copies and do some minor editing and so forth. It's really quite straightforward to use. I mean, to give you an example, so here is my iPhone. Hope you can see it. And so I hit the Voice Record Pro button. It brings up a list of my files. And I hit the red button. And then I hit this button up here. And now it's recording what I'm saying. And it's that simple. I configured it so the gain is pretty high. And if I want to stop, I just hit this button down here and it stopped it. And it was that easy. And if I want to transfer this file to a computer, the way I do it is by email. I just hit send by email like that, hit audio, and it gives you a couple of options. I hit one of them, and then it uses the email on my phone. So it uploads the file to a central server, and then I just type in my email address. If I can do it right. So I typed in my email address, and then I hit send, and off it went. It's that easy. So some of the software, the phone apps will make sonograms. Merlin does, BirdNet does. Of course, these are also software that is really designed to identify birds. And then there's some other ones that used to identify birds, but they're not available anymore, like Song Sleuth and Birdsong ID. The main goal of the sound identification software is to identify the bird, but to do so, it actually records it and saves a recording on your phone. So how well does Merlin work? So I wanted to say a few things about that. So it's a very capable app. I use it fairly often, mostly to test it out to see how well it works. However, it's not always right. It does better in the Northeast than it does in the West. It gets, at least when I use it, more than half of the sounds right, but it does make mistakes. I mean, for example, on numerous occasions, I've been recording lesser goldfinches, and Merlin concluded that I was hearing a red-winged blackbird. On another occasion, I was up in the mountains listening to fox sparrows, and Merlin concluded that I was hearing a sooty grouse. It doesn't always get it right, especially for something that's rare. So if you find something rare and you record it, and Merlin tells you what it is, that by itself is not conclusive. It is not enough to establish the identity of the bird, and the eBird moderators probably won't accept it. Merlin, however, has a lot of really good things about it. It can really help you learn bird sounds. You can get started very easily on how to record them. You can learn a lot about the vocalizations, learn how to deal with sonograms. It's really seeing the sonograms happening in real time is an excellent way to learn. Merlin is it's steadily improving. They augment it with new recordings every several months, so it keeps getting better. Eventually, it's going to be excellent. It's not there yet, but it keeps improving. It's relatively straightforward. You can use it right out of your phone to upload recordings to eBird lists. Personally, though, I recommend transferring the sound files to a computer and then editing them first to remove unnecessary noise and to amplify things. Thousands of Merlin recordings are being entered into eBird every day, and they're making valuable contributions. And people who really are quite savvy can obtain excellent recordings with Merlin. But there are some problems. As I mentioned, it doesn't always identify the birds correctly. And quite a few Merlin users don't realize that and accept what Merlin says without really thinking about it critically. Again, just because Merlin says you saw or you're hearing a something bird doesn't mean you are. In my experience, it's often right, but not always. The sensitivity is also the lowest of the phone apps that I use. I can regularly hear sounds that don't even appear on the scrolling sonogram. And so if they don't appear on the sonogram, Merlin can't identify them. So it just misses them. It seems to have problems with mountain quail as well. I've heard mountain quail many times, and Merlin did not figure out what it was. The other apps that I mentioned are more sensitive. Unfortunately, a lot of Merlin recordings that are going into eBird are really not that good in quality. The volume is very low. You can barely hear the birds. And with a lot of them, there's a lot of background noise. And a lot of these simple problems can be overcome with some very simple editing. And if you just load the software into, load the file into some other software like Audacity or Raven Light, you can trim the noise, you can amplify, and make the recording a lot better. One way to help Merlin out is to get closer to the bird so the sound is louder. It does better when it's loud. Still may not guarantee that it will get it right, but it will have a better chance. You also can't fiddle with things like the gain and low cut filtering and so forth. So let's see. This is what I talked about Voice Record Pro already. This is what the display looks like. If you wanted to transfer files to a computer, for example. This particular file that this one shows was a red crossbill that I recorded on Sunday up near Buckhorn. Now, a little bit about software for computers. There's a lot of audio editing software available for computers. Raven Light and Audacity and Ocean Audio, those are all free. I've used Raven Light and Audacity. I haven't used the other ones. Raven Pro is not free. However, if you have some affiliation with Cornell University, it is free to use. So, for example, you're an alum or you're a current student or you're a member of the staff and so forth. Adobe Audition is also extremely capable for sound editing, and it's even more expensive. So a little bit about Raven Light. I'll say a few things about it, then we're going to try to use it a little bit. It's easy to install. It's free. You do have to set up an account with the Cornell Lab, but if you use eBird, you already have one. And so that's not a problem. You do have to make sure when you start it up that you're not just using the demo version, because that will work for 10 minutes and then quit. Again, it's free, so you just have to, start up the one that lets you edit things. It does have some limitations. There are certain kinds of files that it can't import, but it does really well with MP3s and WAV files. Excuse me, not MP3s, with M4As and WAVs. Unfortunately, it cannot export MP3s. There's a licensing issue. The manual is not super great. As they have a technical manual for Raven Pro, but it talks about some of the things in Raven Light. So let's stop sharing here, stop sharing PowerPoint, and try to bring up Raven Light. Okay, there's that. And here's Raven Light. So this is actually the cardinal that I mentioned earlier. That I showed you a sonogram of that. And so we're going to briefly play a short segment of this. This one's going to scroll, but a little differently from the one before it. Raven Light, yes, please access the microphone. This is an organ cardinal recorded in windy conditions. Using Raven Light is quite easy. You just hit Command O to open a file. Here's a list of some files. We'll choose this one. This is a Buick's Wren. Just click the default settings and bingo, there it is. So the thing at the top is the waveform. That gives you a sense of how the volume varies as a function of time. The part at the bottom is the sonogram. This part is in color. I prefer grayscale. So I'm going to come up here, select grayscale. So now it's gray, and then I just click on this over here, the plus symbol, to zoom in and in pitch. And if I want to zoom in time, then I can do that. So you can see it in finer time detail. and then just hit play. And there it goes, and it plays. The Raven Light is actually pretty easy to use. It's a very capable piece of software, and it can do many sophisticated things, but it's not intrinsically as cumbersome or as difficult to understand as some of the other ones. Audacity, for example, is more difficult to understand. So that was Raven Light. So Audacity, that's the one I use the most. It's not as easy to use. The instructions, the manual isn't very good. It isn't very good unless you know what you really know what you're doing. And some of the instructions aren't especially intuitive. It doesn't automatically generate a sonogram the way that Raven Light just did. You have to know where to click to make it do that. The graphics don't really look as good, but it's a lot more capable once you figure it out. So we've been doing some things with it already. Let me, again, stop sharing this, and we'll briefly share. How about, oops. That's not the one I meant to share. There we go. So this is a California Thrasher. So again, this is what the display looks like. In fact, we recorded this during an LA Birders, just after an LA Birders trip. Last year on one of our trips in the mountains, we deployed a song meter, and this was one of the recordings I got during. I hope you can hear that. It sounds a little soft to me.
It sounds fine.
Okay, there's also mountain quail in the background. So, if I wanted to do things to it, if you'd like, for example, to, fiddle with various settings, there's a, capability up here to do that. And, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. If you want to load up a new one, you again hit Command O and a different file and hit open. And this is what it looks like. So that's the waveform, but there's no immediate obvious place to turn it into a sonogram, but it's this little thing right here with those three little dots. If you click on that, it gives you some options, and then you can make a sonogram out of it, and you can resize it, and you can use the controls to zoom in, for example. This particular recording has a bunch of things on it, most notably a sandhill crane.
It doesn't look like it's updated, man.
Sorry?
The video didn't update. It's still back at the Thrasher.
Oh, oops, I forgot to shoot. I forgot to, thanks. I forgot to deselect the other one. Okay, well, in the interest of time, we're going to just move on. Feel free to ask about using Audacity later if you'd like. Okay, so a little bit about some recorders. I've used a number of them over the years. The principal one that I use now is the Zoom F3. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment, but I still use a Sound Devices Mix Pre 3 and an older Olympus LS10 as a backup. On my iPhone, here are the different pieces of software that I use that we've already talked about. And I do quite a bit with autonomous recorders, especially Song Meter Minis. So here's what two of the recorders look like. The one on the left is the Zoom F3. It's a very capable recorder. It's compact. You can hold it in your hand. It's highly portable, uses just a couple of AA batteries, has many very capable features, and it does 32-bit recording. So it basically, you can't saturate. The bit depth is so enormous that basically do most of the gain with software afterward. The LS10, the Olympus on the right, is an entry-level recorder, which is no longer available, but I still use it as a backup. Instead, this is a good entry-level recorder. This is a Tascam DRO5. The latest version, also is 32-bit. It's only about $120. It has many capabilities, including a very useful 2-second pre-record buffer. It has internal microphones. Those are the things at the top right. But it also, you can connect external microphones to it to improve the sensitivity and directionality. This is the highest end recorder that I use. This is a Sound Devices Mix Pre 3. Very, very capable device. has wonderful sound quality. It's a bit heavy and it's bigger than the other ones, a little harder to carry around, and it really chews through batteries. If you're starting out though, don't start with something this complicated. Start with something that's easier to use. This one has a lot of bells and whistles, and it's a professional sort of grade recording system and does a lot of other things too. So what are some of the things to do to use this, these devices, especially the Zoom F3? The first thing to do is to put your cell phone into airplane mode, because if you're someplace remote, as the phone tries to make connections, it will generate interference and you will hear bursts of static on your recordings. So I try to remember to put my phone into airplane mode. Then you just turn on the recorder. You slide a button on the side, and it starts the recording. And then you slide it again to end it. You need to have an external microphone. Again, this is for the Zoom recorder, which is the one on the left right here, that rectangular one. It's the one I use the most now. It has a pre-record buffer, so it records for 6 seconds before you actually tell it to start recording. It's easy to use, but there's a bit of a learning curve to figure it out. And but once you get there, it's actually pretty straightforward. This one is probably the most popular one being used by bird recorders around the country right now, because it's very capable. It's rugged. It's very portable. The batteries last a long time, and the sound quality is excellent. So some other thoughts about all of this that really help things out with if you're doing a lot of recording. I use lithium batteries. They last a long time. I try to use big memory cards, at least 64 gigabytes, typically double that. I set the sampling up to 48 kilohertz. That way you can see fine detail in songs that change fast. If it's an older recorder that has things like limiters and automatic recording levels, turn all that stuff off. Do it manually, because things will get messed up. Those are really good if you're recording loud concerts, but if you're recording faint birds, you don't want those turned on. With the Zoom, you don't need to worry about it. Also, I always carry extra batteries and a memory card. You could also use a power bank for these things. Then if you really get into it, that's a good thing to do. So a little bit about microphones. I've used several of them, shotgun mics and a parabola. Here are two of the short shotgun microphones. I've used the one on the top. It's quite capable. I don't use these anymore. I have bigger ones and more sensitive ones now that I use more regularly, and are also more directional. But these are a good way to start. This is the one I use the most. This is a long shotgun microphone with a fuzzy windscreen. It also has a hand grip that helps isolate the microphone from handling noise. That's highly recommended. If you just held the microphone with your hand without the grip, you will hear noise on the recording. This particular one, the way that I have it in the picture, is configured to use with my Olympus recorder. You can see the little 3.5 millimeter connector right here near the middle of the picture. Some of my other recorders, like the Zoom recorder, have use XLR cables, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, this microphone is great, but Sennheiser no longer makes them. There's still a lot of them available on the used market on eBay, for example. But if you want a new one, this is the one that they market for basically as a replacement, the MKE 600. It's a very good one. Many of you know Ryan Terrell. He's given several LA Birders talks. This is the one that he uses. It's similar in price, but a little bit less than the one that I use a lot. It's not as directional, but basically just about the same sensitivity. You do want to get a windscreen and a hand grip, which will add another couple $100 to the price. So it's not cheap. It's a very, very nice piece of equipment. So, what are the benefits of these devices? Well, they're more sensitive than my hearing. They're very directional. So, side noise and noise in the back is significantly reduced. If you used, for example, the Olympus recorder without an external microphone, you'd hear more background noise. With a microphone, there's much less. These long shotgun microphones, although they look big, they actually don't weigh very much. It's only about a pound. And I can easily fit that in my knapsack, which I do all the time. I also take it with me when I'm hiking, when I'm mountain biking, because it doesn't weigh much, and when I travel. It's also less expensive than a parabola. And shotgun mics are the best option for recording things that vocalize at low frequencies, like some owls, pigeons, like band-tailed pigeons, and ruffed grouse and sooty grouse. So I also use a parabola. These are images of a Tilinga 22-inch parabola. It's the same kind that I use. These are very, very sensitive. They're also expensive. It's more than $1,000 when I got mine 10 years ago. But it just dramatically increases the volume of the recordings. I use this regularly. It's not as easy to carry around, though, and I don't travel with it very often because it's bulky and takes up a lot of space in my suitcase. There are other options available. Wildtronics is an American company that sells parabolas. They're quite a bit less expensive than the Tilinga that I showed in the previous slide, and they make them in a variety of sizes and configurations. There are two different ones that are shown here with prices that were current as of a few months ago. This is a newer one that's come on the market recently called Bird Mic. It's designed to connect to a recorder that you provide. So it's basically a parabolic dish, a microphone, and a hand grip, and you attach your recorder on the back of it. The illustration on the right shows a dedicated Zoom recorder, I think, but you could also put a cell phone there and record directly into a cell phone. So this is a very capable little recording arrangement, and the dish here has a diameter of about 10 inches. So you're going to hear sounds with this that you cannot hear with your ear. This particular one is designed only to use a 3.5 millimeter connector, and not all of the recorders do that. The lower end ones do. The higher end ones would require a different kind of connector, an XLR connector. So a few pros and cons about the parabolas. They're much more sensitive than a shotgun mic, more sensitive than the human ear. They're extremely directional, and they reduce noise off to the side. They will get you a more pure recording of what the bird sounds like. They are very directional. I mean, if you aim it off to the side just a little bit, the volume will decrease. And if you use headphones, you can really hear the difference if you do that. Some cons about these, well, they're more expensive usually than the shotgun mics. They're big and more cumbersome for traveling. You have to be very careful not to bump the dish. I'm unfortunately very good at bumping it with my hands, with cables, with branches. Large bugs will fly by and bounce off of it. And they're not really the best thing for recording low frequency owl sounds, which I do a lot. Flame-related owls, for example, there's really no benefit to using a dish for something with such a low frequency. They also can pick up background noise that I don't even notice, distant cars and trucks, for example. So they're very, very sensitive. So when I go out in the field, I basically carry a shotgun mic and a parabola as long as I'm in a car. I'll bring them both along with me. So a little bit about the adapters. And I know this is sounding kind of technical, but I wanted to include this in the talk because on some of our LA Birders field trips, people have brought recorders and they were having problems with the right kind of connector. So the different microphones use different connectors. Many of them, the higher end ones, will use an XLR cable, and I'll show you a picture of that shortly. Some of the others, like the smaller shotgun mics that I showed, use a 3.5 millimeter connector, as does that third parabola that I showed. And so you can get adapters that convert from one to the other. So if you get one, all is not lost. And if you realize you need the other, you can get an adapter cable. So here's what they look like. So this picture on the left, that's my Olympus recorder. And it has a 3.5 millimeter cable plugged into it. And then it's plugged into this other cable. Well, so this thing in the middle illustration on the top, this is the adapter. The part here underneath where I'm using the cursor, that connects to an XLR cable here. That's the silver one. And then this little part here with the 90-degree angle, that plugs into the recorder. The illustration on the right shows how this connects. Sorry, that's my bird clock. Let's let that finish before I continue. Oops. So the top part, that's the XLR connector. And then the bottom part is the adapter. And sorry, and to use my my Olympus recorder, I have to plug the XLR connector into an adapter. There's no other way to do it. Darn, this thing is so sensitive. It keeps advancing without me intending to. The illustration on the bottom is showing you the Zoom F3 recorder with the XLR cable plugged right into it. There's no adapter necessary here. It has a 3-pronged connecting hole. So it's very easy to get confused about the different plugs that they require. And a couple of people have asked me about that. So that's why I wanted to include this slide. If you're thinking about getting some recording equipment and this kind of thing is an issue, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be glad to help you. So we're going to say a little bit more about a couple other things, then we're going to wrap it up. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been doing quite a bit with autonomous recording units, sometimes known as sound loggers. There are a few different ones available. The two that I've used are shown here. The basic idea with these devices is that you can put them out someplace, turn them on, and they can record for as long as the batteries last or the memory card doesn't, until that fills. They're programmable and they record everything within their range of sensitivity. So you turn them on and they just record. Now you can program them when to turn on and turn off. And typically when I use these, I have them turn on at a certain time of the day and then turn off at another time of the day. I don't have them running 24/7. But they're omnidirectional, so they pick up everything around them. They use batteries. They, of course, need a memory card, an SD card. The audio moths are less expensive, but they don't come with a warranty. They're on the order of $100, $120 to get the device and to get a waterproof case, which it doesn't come with. The song meters are more sophisticated, and those come in 3 different models. 3 different models for actually 4 now, for birds, and then some other models specifically for recording bats. The ones I use are the minis, which is the one shown here in the illustration. They're not cheap. I know they're about $500 a pop, but they're several times more sensitive than the audio moths. They're waterproof and they come with a warranty. And that's important because one of my audio moths quit working. And so there was $100 that pretty much went out the window because there's no warranty with those. So I use these quite a bit for a number of things. People have been asking me about these, so I wanted to talk about them a little bit. The Cornell Lab also sells autonomous recorders called Swift recorders. They're very capable, but they're bigger and heavier than these, and they're available only for Windows computers. And I use Macs, and so I haven't used any of the Swift recorders. And they have more information about those at the Cornell Lab website. So here's a picture of one of my recorders that is currently deployed. It's attached to an oak tree in the San Gabriel Mountains. I'm using it to try to record owls and the diurnal birds during the dawn chorus. It's programmed to get recordings that last 20 minutes each, between 7 and 10 p.m. and then 4 to 7 a.m. It's got 4 lithium batteries in it. Typically, it lasts about 6 weeks for each set of batteries. It's waterproof. I usually strap them low to a tree so they aren't conspicuous, and I hide them so that I don't put them like right next to a trail. I try to keep them someplace where they aren't visible to people who might somehow be in the area. They can also record nocturnal flight calls, although I don't do a lot of that. There are just too many things to record, and I can't do everything. But I have tried that, and it works pretty well. So a few suggestions now, moving on to the final topic for improving recordings. The first one is just to get closer to the source of the sound. If you can get closer to the bird without disturbing it, do that. It makes a humongous difference. The sound is proportional to 1 over the distance squared. So, if you get half the distance, it's going to be 4 times louder. And so that's a big deal. Minimize handling noise. Stand still. Keep your hands still. Don't bump things. Don't shuffle your feet. Don't talk. Don't whisper. Don't move. Your microphone will pick that up. They're more sensitive than many people realize. It helps to record in places that don't have loud noise in the background, like planes, cars, machinery, the ocean, dogs, other people, and so forth. Wind, rain, loud creaks, those can be a problem too. Now, having said that, if you're hearing something really cool or something rare, even if it's windy or noisy, give it a try. You'll probably get something that will help you identify the bird. It's a good idea to play back the recordings soon after you get them to make sure they're okay. My Olympus is really good at that. It has a couple of external speakers, so you can quickly play it back and figure out what you got. The cell phones all have the capability of doing that too. If you're with a big group of people, it's going to be hard to get good recordings. If you try that, just be aware that it's going to be a struggle. Some people like to use headphones when they're recording, and it can be a great way to tell what you're getting, but it's just another thing you have to manage, and you have only so many hands. And so I find the headphones more cumbersome than useful, so I don't use them very often. A few things about the dedicated microphones and recorders. Again, I mentioned before about things like low cut filters and so forth. Turn those on. That reduces the low frequency rumble. If you're using a dedicated recorder and you're out someplace with weak cell phone signal, put your cell phone into airplane mode. Otherwise, the phone, while trying to establish a signal, will generate interference that will appear on your recordings. This happens a lot. I often forget to do this. Again, if you have a limiter on the recorder, turn it off. Your microphone, you really want to have a fuzzy windscreen. Foam windscreens just aren't as good. The furry ones work better. It's also a good idea to dictate notes to yourself at the end to, tell yourself what it was, what you recorded, where, what the weather was like, date, time, equipment, any other information, behavior, and so forth. With a phone, I think the principal thing is to practice a lot if you want to get good at using it to learn how well it works, what works well, what doesn't work so well. A lot of people use Merlin to help identify the sounds, but it's not a very sensitive app. If you want good sensitivity, I recommend Voice Record Pro or Song Meter Touch. Again, Song Meter Touch will also generate sonograms. Try to avoid windy situations. I played some examples of really windy conditions using a cell phone. Sometimes it can be really distracting. So another thing that very few people who use Merlin do before they upload files to eBird is please edit them. Trim the noise at the beginning and end. Try to zoom in on the parts of the recording that have the bird you care about. And the folks at eBird request that even if there's low frequency noise, please don't filter it out. If they're interested in the recording, they'll do that for you. So give your phone a try. You have nothing to lose. It's digital. If you try it and you don't like it, just delete it. No harm done. And you may actually discover that it works quite well, and it can work a lot better than many people realize. So I think with that, I was going to play another recording, but I already played it, and we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to stop right there. I'll sort of leave this up. There are some demo videos on the Cornell Lab website that show how to use some of the equipment that I described today. And so if you go to this website here, you can see some of those videos, and they'll show you how to use things. At some point, we're going to do a sound workshop in person where we'll actually go over some of this and then try it out in the field. I'm not sure yet when that's going to happen, but that is something we're thinking about doing. And of course, whenever we have an LA Birders trip, we try to do recordings and talk about it. So with that, I'm going to stop and open things up for questions. So I stop sharing and
fantastic.
Questions.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. And yes, we have a number of questions coming through. Just a reminder, if you have a question for Lance, please put it in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. That way we won't miss it. And let's get on to our first question. An anonymous person asks, is it better to use Voice Record Pro or Voice Record Pro 7?
Well, the latest version that I have is Pro 7. I'm not an expert on the different versions of Voice Record Pro, but that's the one that ended up on my phone when I loaded it up. And it was a while ago, but it keeps on updating. So again, I don't know about the other versions of it that might be available, but that's the one I have, and I'm quite happy with it. And every so often, it does an update. It's possible, though, that there might be an even more recent one. I honestly don't know. I haven't checked.
Okay, and just for your information also, I just found and downloaded Song Meter Touch on my Android. So it's available on Android.
Great.
Susan asks, what is the kilohertz range of a bird song in general? Is it the same as humans, or how much higher?
So yeah, that's an interesting question. It varies considerably from species to species. So some of the owls, um, for example, flammulated owl males and some great horned owl sounds can be down as low as 300 or 400 hertz. And I mean, we can hear those. At least many people can if your hearing is reasonably good. On the high end, um, most birds have an upper range below 10 kilohertz. There are some that go higher than that. So a good example, the one that gets up to around 10 kilohertz, um, golden crown kinglet. Some of the sounds from brown creepers.
Probably.
They get way up there. Some of the cedar waxwing calls get pretty high, although I don't think they get up to 10 kilohertz. Now, there are also some birds that vocalize above the range of human hearing. If you have the opportunity to visit New Zealand, there are a couple of species there that will sing and you can't hear them. I had that experience. I forget which one it was. It was on the island of Tiritiri Matangi off the coast of Auckland. We watched it sing and we could not hear it. It was really cool. The recorders, however, could pick it up because all these recorders will record up to about 20 kilohertz or maybe a little bit higher than that. And so they will pick it up. And if you generate a sonogram, you'll be able to see something even if you can't hear it.
Great. Ruby Crown Kinglet songs, just as they're about to move out. Those are really high. Do you know?
Yes, some parts of those are pretty high too. Yeah.
Yeah. Great, great. Alicia asks, for those of us in our first few years of bird sound recording, do you have any recommendations for resources we can use to learn more about editing? I fear I might be violating best practices in my generous use of the noise reduction and amplify tools in Audacity. I often have to try to remove the sound of rushing water and or airplanes.
Okay, well, so if you're planning to upload recordings to eBird, they specifically ask that you not remove the low frequency sounds. And that'll save you some time if you just leave that in there. So I don't bother. Unless it's some unusual situation where maybe something was really faint and it was a rare bird that we were trying to identify. So in terms of the editing that I do, most of it's not really all that complicated. I load the file into Audacity. I generate a sonogram. I listen to it. Well, if it's a file that I obtained with my Zoom recorder, the first thing I do is I normalize it, which is a form of amplification. That's something the Cornell Lab also wants. What it does is it usually amplifies the sounds and it puts the peak volume at the same level. That is at a standardized level, which is the one that they use at the lab. And that usually amplifies things. Or you could just straight out use an amplify option. But so I do that, I amplify it, I look at it, I play it. If it's a recording that I want to upload to eBird, I will copy the part that I want. I'll paste it into another, an empty file, and then I'll export it as a WAV file and, give it a different name so I don't mix it up with the original. And that's really all I do. I mean, you can do all kinds of sophisticated things with sound editing, but I don't really do all that much. I don't do a lot of low frequency or high frequency filtering, for example. There's all kinds of, other fancy noise reduction you can do. I don't bother doing much of that. What I try to do is to use best practices so I don't have to do any of that. Try to get close to the bird without bothering it. Try to get recordings in reasonably quiet situations. Try to use the directionality of the mic. I mean, for example, recently just this past weekend, I was up after we were trying to find the Swainson's hawks. I was up at Buckhorn, and there's a loud creak through the campground right now. And I was trying to record some things. So I tried pointing the microphone so it wasn't pointed both at the bird and at the creek. I positioned myself so I was pointed at the bird away from the creek. generally 90 degrees away from the creek to minimize the sound. So I tried to do things like that. Kind of a long answer to your question, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, and John also points out in the Q&A that birds that are often by running water can have sound components significantly above human hearing.
Yeah, he would know probably better than I, given all the far-flung places that he has visited. I mean, a local example of that would be an American dipper. Getting good recordings of dippers can be challenging because they typically live along fast-moving loud brooks and creeks. Sometimes you're lucky if you're trying to record them and you'll find them in a place where the water is moving kind of smoothly and it's not very loud. But quite often they're singing away. Like there was one down the creek from Buckhorn last year, and when we heard it singing, it was right next to a waterfall, so it was quite loud. But you're right, you could still hear it over the waterfall because the waterfall tends to have a lower pitch, lower frequency, and the bird is singing at a higher frequency. So you can still hear the bird, but you're going to have substantial background noise. It's quite difficult to avoid. I'm sure there are other examples of that, and John would know more about it than I would because he's seen a lot more birds around the world than I.
He's gone around. Before we sign off, everyone, please go to the webinar chat, and Naresh has posted the Macaulay Library recording gear review for 2019, I believe it is. Anyways, go ahead and grab that before we sign off, so you can kind of check out what their recommendations are.
Yeah, their video is a little bit dated. It's a few years old now, but the basic ideas, though, the basic principles of how to get good recordings are still pretty much the same. So it's definitely worth checking to see what what they had to say there.
Great. Alicia also asks, also at ending, are there ways of separating bird sounds that overlap? For example, when you're recording a robin and a wren happens to sing in the middle.
Well, maybe somebody who's very savvy about sound editing could answer that better than I could. I don't try. I'm not aware that there's a way, but maybe there's some sophisticated sound person, sound engineer would know how to do that. I don't. Yeah, it happens all the time. When I was looking at recordings to play for everybody tonight, I played a white-eyed vireo. Well, when I first heard the white-eyed vireo, there was a Carolina wren singing right on top of it. And I waited a while so they could kind of get out of sync with each other. Ultimately, I chose to play a recording that didn't have the Carolina wren because it was kind of distracting, as wonderful as it was. But yeah, they were right on top of each other. And on top of that, there was a tufted titmouse singing and a pine warbler. So it was this cacophony of confusing sounds. And if you get up at dawn and say the end of May, you're going to hear all these different sounds superimposing on each other, and it can be a real challenge to sift through it and sort out what you're hearing, which is something that I try to do with those autonomous recording unit files that I get, because I've got 3 of those right now that are out there recording dawn chorus in different elevations in the local mountains, and you hear all these different things. And early in the morning and early in the spring, there aren't that many things singing, but as we get deeper into the spring, it can get overwhelming. And if you're in the Northeast, it's even more so because there are even more species than there are here.
Yeah, I can.
So I don't know the answer. I wish I could tell you if that's something that's straightforward or even possible to do. I don't know. I'm not aware of how to do it, but maybe somebody who's more savvy than I am could address that.
Well, I've done it briefly with recordings, and if you use a sonogram, you're literally, just as in Photoshop, you're literally cutting out sonogram things, but it's really not worth it. And Macaulay doesn't want you to do it.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that's right, Juan. You have an enormous amount of experience with music, so
Yeah,
you would
so
know
it
better than I.
can be done, but it's not something you really want to do. And Lance, there are an awful lot of thank yous in the webinar chat. It was wonderful tonight, and I personally want to thank you because, as you know, Birding 101 starts this week, and we are using one of your recordings as for our sound test and all that. Not the acorn woodpecker that you happen to mention.
Ah,
I know you have many on there, but one of your acorn woodpeckers on Xeno-Canto. So thank you very much.
oh, sure.
And thank
No
you,
problem.
everyone. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And also, please join us next month when we have Tom Stevenson here. And I think that's it. Good
Okay.
night, everyone.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. See you next time.
See you next time. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night.